All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Anto Budiajo. Welcome to Monday Live. I'm going to kick off with a few slides and then we can have a discussion. So let me just share my screen. So we're doing this so that we can help the building automation industry get through the pandemic and most importantly, try and figure out what's on the other side of this for commercial buildings. So we really this is really sort of a conversation trying to uncover best practices, trying to sort of figure out what's working, what's not working, a little bit of a brainstorming and sort of exploring what people are saying out there. The profiles of the speakers are on mondaylive.org, links to the respective LinkedIn profiles. One point to note is the views that's expressed here are views of the individuals personally, not of any organization or company. If you have some questions, and we definitely want to have questions and want to make comments, please post them in the Zoom Q&A in the chat and we'll respond to them. And if you can please complete the survey at the end of the show here. So we have a number of slides, sort of a collection of thoughts from the participants here. Ken Sinclair this month on automated buildings is talking about not normal. Two words has caused quite a bit of a controversy, let's put it that way. So go ahead in that direction and read all about that. Steve Fay, who I don't see on the call now, is launched something that may be useful for the channel contractors and other people. So please visit there. John Petsy has brought up a number of sort of headlines that I'm sure we'll get to talk about in the course of this hour, about sort of repurposing real estate. Therese as well, talking about flexible spaces. And I got excited where she says, what are some AEC pubs? I thought, being a Brit, I thought she was talking about real pubs. It's not. It's talking about publications. And Roger sort of highlighted this really sort of interesting document from CBRE in Asia, which I'm sure we'll talk about again over the course of this hour. So today's topic is repurposing buildings, which is really thinking about how buildings may have been built for one purpose, and then through the realities of getting through COVID and getting to the other side, that there'll be sort of opportunities or need to actually think about using them in a different way. And specifically the two questions is there going to be a sort of a trend to repurpose buildings? Is that a sort of a key trend? That's one of the things that we're trying to sort of figure out as part of Monday Live, is trying to understand the trends. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. And if there is going to be a trend to repurpose buildings into different types of buildings or mixed use and flexible use buildings, what does that mean for controls and automation? Because most of the people on this call are people from the controls and automation space. So those are kind of really the two questions for the day. So with that, I'm going to go back to all of us, and maybe I want to put it out there to you guys. Who wants to start? What is this trend? Is this a trend, or is this just a figment of our collective imagination? Who wants to start this? Roger, want to start that from your?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess the repurposing assumes that there will be significant changes to the use of the buildings, i.e. that buildings will become vacant, or that space will become vacant, and deurbanization, people moving out of areas and moving into other areas. So that seems, I guess from the statement, seems to be a gimme that that's going to happen. And I guess the real challenge will be is what is, practically what can you change? Certainly we've seen a few buildings here in the UK previously, actually, where they've been empty and they've been changed to low cost rent only type buildings. So they managed to actually change them in some of the outer city areas. One would guess it's a challenge to actually look at what changes you could make to some of the huge skyscrapers, obviously in city centres, because that would be huge. But it's what format will companies leave or remain in buildings? Will they remain with the corporate headquarters in a city, or move it out and then have satellite offices and have short-term leases or co-working type offices for people to have meetings? So that means, what would those buildings change to? So I suppose the question initially is saying everybody appears to be agreeing that there will suddenly become more vacant space due to people leaving the offices, and which ones can you change and repurpose?
Anyone else want to chime in?
Just to trigger off Roger's, as an excellent resource you provided on the flex space. On Saturday, I got together with Eric and Ken on control trends, and we had a pretty open, fun chat. We pulled some pie out of the sky and did all kinds of weird things. But yeah, that's the idea that we're probably going to be working in 3 places. We're going to be working at home, we're going to be working at the office, and then what we've kind of identified as the in-between, which will be some kind of a social, close community location. And that's an interesting thing. And that, I think, presents an interesting challenge for these companies, the large companies in particular, that they actually need automation systems that straddle all 3 of those. And I think that will lead them to the conclusion that they need much more portability in their automation systems. And we might see when a tenant moves into a large building and takes a bunch of floors, that he would bring with him his automation system. The other thing is that automation system is likely to include sensors that haven't been invented yet, because there's a lot of those evolving. So some interesting stuff happening there, and who knows where it's all going to play out. But flexibility is definitely a big piece. Repurposing quickly, and mixed use buildings, I think, is another harbinger of what's happening.
So Ken, just thinking about the tenant requirements, is it really necessary for the owners to bring their own controls, or is it for them to be able to specify what data they want to have access to? So if I own the building, or maybe I'm having it managed by JLL, and I'm going to lease space, how about I just come in with a spec that says, here's the data I want to have access to, and then JLL provides the information, whether they do it on a Metasys or Niagara or whatever system. Why as a tenant, why should I care?
Yeah, I see that happening, but I see it happening as a specification to do an interface to their platform. Mm-hmm. And the reason I see them wanting to grab the platform is because of the fact they have to maintain communication with their employees over the three domains: home, the in-between.
Yeah. I get that, but again, the manufacturers could all provide an open API to take the data and ship it out to whatever that owner's platform happens to be. But trying to actually re-instrument around some other system than the one that the building owner already has.
I never saw that. I saw the core systems. I saw it exactly playing out the way you're describing it. Okay. They will move into these systems and they will reach out. So what it'll do is it'll actually create a greater pressure for us to come up with standards backnuts and other things. But the other looming piece, I think, is the LoRa and all that. There may in fact be a jump over the internet. That'll be an interesting piece. See how that all plays out, because right now everything is thought to be driven by the internet, the cloud. Now we're starting to get a few people that are sort of talking about other networks that are above or below, depending on your opinion of the internet. Wi-Fi is taking on a life of its own. There's just so much going on, G5, G6. There's just so many things. The other trend I think that's happening in the client space and the platform space is the idea of them taking over and becoming their own telco. And that fits well into this kind of thinking as well. So these are big thoughts, and I'm always talking about something that's going to happen a few years.
So
away.
let's just sort of
what's happening tomorrow.
Let's just focus on the trend to repurpose buildings first, and then we'll get to what it
Okay.
the impacts on the
Let
technology.
me throw in a couple of thoughts on that, because I guess when we talked about this as a topic, I started thinking of it maybe on a different level, right? When I come to these calls, and I hope our audience, we're trying to figure out what's happening among a lot of, I won't say noise, because I think all of the articles and commentary isn't noise. It's the fact that nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. But one of the big questions that's going to affect and maybe drive repurposing is kind of a bigger societal thing. Will the trend to urbanization be reduced, right? There'd been this big trend to young people want to live in the city, have close access. That drove repurposing of old buildings, right? We're going to turn to apartments, high-end condos, all that type of stuff. But now they're saying, don't get on the subway, drive your car, find another way. Is it going to have that type of a societal impact that it changes the direction of urbanization and drives it back towards suburbs, which would potentially create more demand for office space, however it is, in the suburbs, right? I certainly don't know the answer to that, but I think it's pretty interesting, because I think, fear can really make significant changes, right? Fear and money will make the two biggest changes. If people truly are saying, you know what, I don't want to be that, I don't want to be walking with 100,000 people down the street anymore just to do my job. So that could affect the driver on what kind of repurposing comes after that.
I think it's a combination of.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, I think it's not one driver, but it's multifaceted. And I think, John, I agree with you. Should that begin to take hold? The other is the business side. Imagine you're a building owner. I have 10 buildings, 20 buildings, 100 buildings. All of a sudden, obviously, I'm facing where they may not be completely occupied, rented out, or whatever, but that we're seeing that trend that corporations are going to multi-site buildings in various places, and am I going to be forced to be able to have to repurpose these buildings in order for me to have a sustainable business in the future?
Yeah, one of the words that struck out to me from the CBRE report that you shared, Roger, is this concept of hub and spoke spaces. Mm-hmm. That you would have a core place where you do the work, and then you have lots of other places where people can do work at different times. That's kind of an interesting concept, which supports the sort of the social sort of change in things.
Yeah, as much of what John was saying is that, perhaps, you might go to the HQ every now and again, but you might have your meetings in the satellite offices or take out some co-working space. And therefore that means, and I've certainly seen it already with some of my kids and some others, where they're saying, hey, yep, I don't mind doing remote working for 2.5 days, but it also means I need a garden, so I want to move out a bit. Lots of people are just saying, hey, don't even look for a property, a flat that hasn't got a garden anymore, apartment hasn't got any grass, or say I can sit outside. So people are already thinking of, hey, next move, which will be soon, I'm gonna be moving out to somewhere where I've got some space. And even if property prices come down, the fact that they're moving up the ladder maybe means that they're getting a better deal anyway, so they don't mind losing a bit on what they're doing. But it's suggesting that people will, as John said, move out, and therefore forcing companies to have satellite offices, which will create a demand for offices in, away from the cities and more in the suburbs.
I think the other thing that's happened too is younger people are less attached to real estate than we were in our era. Actually, it was almost, we were rewarded by the real estate that we were housed in. They have less of that attention. They're as happy on the beach or at Starbucks or wherever they are. And so the in-between now, it further blurs from actually being physical space to actually being virtual space that they're comfortable in. And the other thing that's starting to happen, I think, is basically pods of random connection so that they can move through that. So I think it's one of my comments I made in one of my articles is that this whole thing has made us think at least 10 years younger. We probably need to think 20 and 30 years younger, but we were forced all of a sudden one day, we had all the stuff we talked about that we really knew, we actually had to use it. And oh my God. And we had to ask younger people, how do we really use this stuff? And I think, it's just that different mindset. So I think that is going to get involved in this repurposing.
So Therese, what's the last week or so, what's going on in Silicon Valley? You've got the ear on the ground there on this issue.
Yeah, I think there are even more companies that are saying you can work from home till at least 2021. And yeah, in my slides, I offered two views. Like John Petsy, I think I was looking at flexible spaces in terms of first the pushing out of people. There was a move towards density. People that were in 60-foot cubes got it reduced to 40-foot cubes in recent years, and now that's all being. While the offices are empty, those are being pushed out. The example I brought that I could find was about the Apple campus, because among the high-tech companies around here, Apple is the one that would really like to get people back sooner. So they're doing the work as. Was it, I think it was a Cushman Wakefield that I shared about keeping people 7 feet apart, closing the kitchens. They're in there now in the spaceship at Apple and reconfiguring it in that way. And you could move out that thinking to every industrial, commercial, big company is thinking about how do we make our cubicles a little bit bigger, how do, when people are in common space, how do we keep them apart? Just like when we're at the store, were they going to enter and there'll be tape on the floors about how close you can stand when you're in the coffee room. But I think it's very low tech at this point, even at Apple. The bigger push, and I added an extra link that was actually kind of an older one on the bottom of my slide, that was just how much Google and Apple had told the cities of Mountain View and Cupertino, we'll try to contribute to the community to build housing for all these employees we're bringing to this area. We're not on Vancouver Island like Ken, but this little peninsula is small, and these big campuses were being built without much thought about, can the schools handle, if all these people that live in the cubicles have children, can the schools handle it? Can the roads handle it? The companies weren't thinking about that, and the city planners were making them think about that. And then they were saying, well, we'll donate this much money to the city of Mountain View or to the city of Cupertino to build the infrastructure that our employees need. This is sort of a get out of jail free card.
So, Bill, Jim, do you want to contribute on this part of this conversation?
I can only come from a autobiographical perspective here on what I've done, which is I've canceled our lease in Boston as of August. We bought an old mill in the exurbs about an hour and 10 minutes out of the city. We went to work from home over a year and a half ago, and people don't come in very often anymore anyways. We have all hands company meetings once a month, and people will drive to our external facility. But in the long term, we have no intention of abandoning Boston. We already have some satellite offices in Boston, and we'll be back to downtown Boston in a much smaller space, just for impromptu meetings and hosting clients when the bottom falls out of the rents and things recover, which I suspect they will. So I think that I don't know what everyone else is going to do, but that's what I'm doing.
I've got a thought I'd like to add to the repurposing, which is, I think we talked about this a couple days ago, but if you look at the major office towers in the cities, they're high-end tenants, right? They're A space, AAA space, and so it's going to be, I think, much harder for them to keep that level of rent going because there's just the attraction or trying to have all these people commute into the city, go into these buildings is going to be a real challenge on two fronts. One is health, because you got a lot of people coming in through public transportation, and there's a real fear around that now. And if you try to drive into a city like New York, you're talking about an awful commute and the cost of doing it and the cost of parking. So that's a problem. And then three, which we're now seeing, is crime, security. So if these cities are going to defund their police, which is what they're getting serious about doing, then young people in particular, I think anybody is going to be questioning whether they want to be in the city when you see what is going on. So what's that going to mean? Well, the other counter to this thing is people between the ages of 21 and 35 still want to socialize. They don't necessarily want to be out in the exurbs, miles away from their friends. So they're still going to want to be in cities. So how do you do that and avoid the commute problem, the health problem, and the security problem? Well, if you repurpose these buildings such that a grocery store is in them, restaurants are in them, and there's security, private security on the building itself, if the police aren't going to come when 911's called, and the apartments are right there on the upper floors, now you got a way in which you can actually turn that building into a livable community. I could see that working. That's my thought.
Bill, you posted some comments just now.
Yeah, it's an interesting time because there's a confluence of social and physical virus things that are all together. I wonder if, Americans, let's just say Americans for now, we're well known for having very short memories. And I wonder if guys, like Jim are just going to wait it out and then right back into the city, swoop up real estate cheap, and in a few years from now, everybody will have forgotten 2020. That's always a possibility, folks. Remember that. It's always a possibility. It's a lot of prognostication. I'm sitting out here in the suburbs looking out my window going, man, Bill, did you make a good decision not moving into town? It'll be an interesting few years to watch, but we are known for having short memories in this country.
Jim Butler, you had a point about cost.
Yeah, if I try to put myself in the shoes of a building owner right now, I don't think I'm going to be wanting to make significant capital investments until I can see the way that the wind is blowing in the longer term here. Bill, for example, posed the question about the repurposing from commercial to residential. I think that's pretty expensive to do, and building owners are more likely to look at incremental repurposing, at least in the short term, before they make a big capital commitment. And the capital commitment would only occur if they see this kind of societal change that people have been talking about.
Okay, so it seems that we don't know is the real answer, and there's a lot of the answers is dependent on bigger things that
We don't have enough data points. You know, a news item was rent rates dipped 9.2% in San Francisco in the month of May, and 13% further down the valley in the Mountain View area, right? That's one, you know, they could, as Bill said, they could be right back up there in August, right? And for those people who signed a lease this, you know, a 2-year lease this month, great, you know, they get a lower rate. Or does it form a trend? We don't have enough data points to draw a line through it yet, you know?
I'm wondering, Anto, I know we're here to talk about repurposing, but you know, we know who's on the call today. We can see the participants. I'm wondering what could be happening today, making the assumption that no repurposing or incremental repurposing could be that. What is it that the controls and analytics experts on this call, this conversation today, could be doing right now to change whatever trajectory may or may not be out there as it is?
Before we do that, let me do this. I did a little survey I'll share with you guys to some of my friends or whatever in the industry. And I won't mention their names, but I'll read a couple questions, provide these answers. Because again, I think this is, it's good information. And to John's point, it gives us more data points, but is it enough? No. So question, are you going to see a shift from corporate centers to suburban space? I have not seen any wholesale shift yet. Landlords likely to forgive leases, so any shift to the burbs will be gradual over time if and when tenants decide not to renew as leases expire. And many workers just want to work remote and not go to any office, even in the suburbs. Another question, empty retail space in malls. There is lots of open space at affordable rates. The challenge will be which suburb to choose. Suburb location might be no better or even worse for some employees who live convenient to current office location. City center might actually be easier for many to do public transportation compared to driving from south side to north side across town. As various stages begin to open, he and his firm right now don't see major changes yet. Many folks will be happy if things just go back to the way they were. A good number of people may want to work remote, but that will only suffice long-term if their work is measurable. So again, that's one person's perspective, which I thought was interesting. Another, a consultant's perspective was, let's see, will we see a move from central corporate building campus to smaller, multiple suburban offices? His answer, mixed approaches, but more distributed geographically because of remote work success and acceptance. Will empty retail space and shopping malls be turned into workplaces, new suburban satellite offices? Malls already were turning into more entertainment destinations versus shopping. They will become more of distributed work locations, as with the trend in co-working. However, co-working will not likely continue with its density it has, and therefore defeats one of the co-working value propositions away. Bottom line is more mixed purpose than ever before: work, shop, entertainment, eat. So there's a 2 out of about 6 people that I had shared information with.
Good comments.
So I guess what I try and do in these sort of situations is to try and understand the trends, the sort of broad trends, because we don't have enough specific data points to actually say exactly what's going to happen. But I would imagine things like agility and flexibility, those are kind of the words, those are kind of the attributes that real estate or commercial real estate is likely to head in that kind of direction. Does that sort of resonate with you guys?
Yeah, I think so. In the in-between, the agility, if you look at how the software companies handle what Mark was talking about, is they basically have a concept they call pop-ups. And what they do is they schedule their pop-ups to occur in various places. It might come in a shopping mall. They'll basically have it, and they'll just bring 50 people. So you only have to travel once to that suburb to actually go to that pop-up. The other thing is the pop-ups are typically close community. You don't need to fly or travel long periods. So I think that's another trend. And another problem we've identified with the zooming is we tend to all cluster in, everyone has almost the same opinion, really. And we need that randomness, and maybe the close community is the place where we'll get the random thoughts and other companies struggling with the same problem.
So with that, why don't we sort of move to the second part of this, is that if some of these things that we're talking about is likely to happen, and things like agility and flexibility and changes is kind of at the core of that sort of new world. How does that sort of relate to building automation and control systems and buildings themselves? Because if I've learned something over the decades, agile is not a word to be used when it comes to thinking about buildings and building systems. So what is the systems going to look like in that kind of world where agility is a key?
I think the interesting thing here will be is that, people are not going to rip out systems, so they're going to want to modify them. Yes, the building itself will be modified, partitions will come down, go up, relay out. So the control system that's already installed will have to be recommissioned or perhaps redesigned, and maybe some of the plant will have to be modified to accommodate, better air quality and, those sort of things. But I think the interesting thing is going to be for the industry is that if new construction, let's say, goes away with, in the scale we've known it at before, that means people are going to be looking for their business and what are we going to do? Surely controllers themselves tend to be a commodity. This is going to start getting people to move to think about what services can they provide behind the normal solutions that they, provide today to their customer base, because there will be other things that they need or that the building's going to have, and the data that suddenly is available that needs to be assessed and really, kind of taking it and making use of it. And I think the challenge will be to the industry is, can the controls industry be repurposed to some extent to suddenly provide different services?
Can the BAS industry be repurposed?
Oh, yes.
It sounded like you said people are going to want the data and look at the data. Jim, did you hear that? I think this is good news, man.
And value the data.
Got to work better.
I won't go that far.
Are they going to value the data, or are they going to want someone else to take care of the problem for them?
I guess that's what I was saying. I could say, Jim, that people who may have that knowledge, which could sit with the industry, and the people that sat in it, certainly all the companies that sat on the air now, are the ones that could offer the knowledge of what goes on with their control systems and how they could provide additional services built around the information and the controls that they could have put into their buildings.
So is this another, and again, key word here, folks, another value point business case for truly open systems?
I would imagine that the words open system conjures up so many things from our history that may be difficult to, which is your point, the point of your question.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, open one.
Yeah, I don't think it requires it. You could, let's take it all the way to the end. It's, environmental conditions as a service, right? You will be comfortable. You will have clean air. You will have the adequate air changes. Don't ask me how I do it. I'll prove to you I do it. You don't need open systems for that. You could put in one vendor's system and have it completely closed. And if you're giving the occupants environment as a service, you don't actually need an open system to accomplish that.
But don't you need the sort of scenario where if I'm thinking of leasing space in a building, maybe for a very short time, like 3 months or 6 months, which seems to be kind of what people are doing, that you just want to say, I want to access your data for all the stuff that I need, the data for that building, right? So the way that you actually can, there needs to be a sort of a mechanism to be able to tap into that data and use it.
Yeah, mechanism, but that doesn't mean open, right?
Yeah.
Here's my great building and I've got complete control of it and it's totally proprietary. And if you want to come in here, I will give you the data that we agreed to in the lease. It
Right.
isn't open. Those two
Yeah.
things aren't equivalent. Right.
Yeah.
So
But it-
I'm just wondering, from the IT world, when you sell infrastructure as a service, you can price it on a per user basis. So if the company has 10 employees or 50 employees or 250 employees, you can come up with a price per employee per month that you sell it for. And can you guys envision a world where basically we do something similar? How many tenants in the space are we talking about? And is that the right metric possibly to use? And it's a per month, and it includes everything. Includes the support, includes the equipment, and it's sold as a service. And maybe it's got a minimum 3-year contract or something, but basically it's a complete service, including support and upgrades and cyber and network protection and all that stuff. Is that a world we could possibly see ourselves moving into? And then screw the open. I mean, sorry, but as long as you have connectivity, how the protocols really don't matter at the end of the day, as long as you have a way to get the data out.
Sooner than later, to your point.
But then there has to be a mechanism to get to the data. I mean, it's maybe open. That's why I said what I said about open standards, that it's kind of, it has sort of a bad vibe, right? But as long as you can access it, regardless whether I pick that building or that building or that building, then I'm good. I don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care.
Yeah, to John's point, forget open buildings. Well, if you're a manufacturer, an integrator, or an analytics company, just make your stuff work with everybody. Simple.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's a system. Yeah, I think there's another question inside of all this is the building owner going to buy this, or is the client going to buy it, the leasee? Because I think it makes more sense to him. He has the amount of people that are actually using it. The other big problem is coming is this whole assembly like Steve's working with, trying to put some data together as to who potentially may have the virus, and all of this very, very personal information that he was doing for cybersecurity. Now he's pushing that over to COVID, a method of tracking those folks. So this is kind of real personal information that I don't feel right about giving to my building owner. I'm okay to give it to my boss, but I'm not giving it. So I think we might see them kind of ripping that away. And we've seen a lot of movement in the platforms, the corporate platforms, and just a whole bunch of things kind of getting taken out. Well, actually, I think we'll have the same amount of work, probably even more work, but I still see that we may in fact end up working more for the client. And to give an example of that is some of these incredibly large buildings in Asia, like the hotels have taken the top 50 floors, and they basically, you're in this building and all of a sudden you hit the top 50 floors and it's just like a whole new world. And they don't even know that building all they're looking for is the utility, is there hot water in the pipes and chilled water if it's a central system, which by the way, it probably is not a central system. is probably a very decentralized system, even though it's on top of a high-rise building. So we're starting to see that model, I think. So anyway, that just interesting.
So the concept of having data become sort of a clause in the lease to say that you shall provide data, that kind of thing, that's kind of a new concept in this setting, in this space.
Yeah, for owners to care enough to ask for it, I think I would agree. That will be a new trend if it materializes, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I do have one concern, Anto, about those, as you say, is the agility. I think with lots of owners and occupiers probably going to be very careful about capital expenditure for the next period. You know, really there's an opportunity to create more SaaS type services or things, you know, and you have to ask the question, if I was a chiller manufacturer or someone who services chillers, why wouldn't I actually just say, hey, you know what, I'll be a utility, I'll provide you with cold water. You just pay me cold, you know, you just pay me for cold water and I'll maintain the chill. You don't have to worry about it or anything, and it's X amount a month. Mm-hmm. And then you're guaranteeing them a service of that, where it's a, you know, hot water or cold water, boiler or chiller. But there's opportunities to do that. But I'm concerned about the industry's agility to actually just come up and go for something like that. I mean, why wouldn't you, as a chiller manufacturer, just actually say, hey, yeah, you know, we'll sell you cold water. Chiller costs you nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That goes back
Isn't
to
that on people like us, though? I mean, so it's a really great point. A lot of industries are going there, have gone there, think jet engines. I think, is it the industry that's not agile, or is it from a vendor's point of view, our inability to be flexible on pricing or creative or create context? I think we can convince people to do stuff if the price is right and the math works.
I think the gain is a challenge, though, Bill, because, you know, if you're a chiller manufacturer and you went to the mechanical contractor and said, okay, give me a price for your chiller, and you say, okay, it's nothing, and he says, yeah, right, how do I mark up nothing? Just give me a price for the chiller, right? Yeah. So that the contractual chain is a little bit of an issue with this, which is why whatever comes out of this is, if there is an ability to change and provide services, it's got to be with the, you know, the real estate guys or the occupiers, and not the standard route to market that we take today.
Right.
I think that the timeline is kind of built into how we think. You know, I was kind of laughing a little bit at Steve Fay earlier, but just now I was talking about, you know, if you can sign a lease for 3 years, right? So, but if you're thinking in the sort of WeWork kind of model, you don't want to do that. You want to do 3 months maybe at the most, right? So even in our thinking, we're not thinking in really, really short terms. And if you commit to a service for either a month or for 3 months, you know, you have to think about the CapEx side of that completely differently, as what you're saying, Roger. You can't really sort of try and amortize the CapEx.
So what if, okay, I agree. I mean, people don't want to sign long-term leases. I get that. So in order to really control the action, what would be the possibility you go into a building that's got a 3-4-year-old system, and I offer to buy it at a steep discount, buy all the controls, buy the HVAC equipment at a steep discount, and then I turn around and I turn that into a service offering, including support and upgrades and all that stuff. So now I got complete control end to end, everything in there, and I offer it tenant by tenant, month to month. Can I make the numbers work, to your point, Bill? I think it's possible. Haven't really thought it through until we just started talking about it, but I could see it. If you could get, I mean, and the building owners, I mean, you're writing them a check. I'm going to the building owner, here's a check for all this stuff that you paid 4 years ago. Here's a check.
Isn't that called performance contracting?
Mm-hmm.
But
Not
with
exactly.
a different ultimate customer. It kind of has that element to it, but it's different.
It seems like it goes beyond performance contracting, because you're not just providing a system but you're also operating the system in a sense.
Right.
And taking the risk. Well,
They're
that's
taking the risk.
Yeah.
I know of one company doing that for a university. They completely took over the assets and they're managing it. They're changing the whole assets completely as well as maintaining and managing it.
Yeah.
I think in institutional kind of facilities, that's maybe not common, but it's not unusual to have that kind of.
I mean, this whole build, own, operate, manage model, people have been talking about it for 20 years. But the institutional inertia of things that Roger mentioned, like who gets the markup and how does it actually work, and are people actually agile enough, primarily on the customer side and on the specifying side, to be this imaginative? And my 30 years in the industry says no. But the imagination is not lacking on the side of the people on the call or people who would be happy to put these models together. But I haven't seen the uptake from the end customers. Is this event enough to kick that over? I doubt it.
Commentary from one of our customers in Europe: design, build, operate, 20-year. They don't just design the building. They don't just construct it. They design, build, operate, and they're the ones on the hook for efficient performance within specified performance, comfort, whatever, and the cost of energy. That makes them a great customer of ours because they need the data. They need to actually watch how the building's going because it's in their financial interest. What's the difference? That model came out of Europe many years ago, and there are places where it's still strong. And I would agree with Jim. We don't. I think it just conflicts with how the U.S. Built environment works, how buildings are built, and how the value chain and the profit chain works. It's completely doable, except for societal factors, I think.
It might happen now because the value of the assets were going higher and higher in each year. So the people who built the buildings, they would flip it the next year. So now that's not going to happen. Maybe we'll see more of these performance contractings.
Or whatever this thing is called, this new model is called, because it.
Another example is from the U.S. We met a company, and they basically go in and buy the rooftop units, multi-site retailers, right? And then have a long-term contract to provide cooling or heating within a certain range.
Yeah,
So
same idea, John. Yeah.
Of their asset. Yeah, just what you were saying. Alleviate them of their capital asset, sign a long-term service deal. They take the risk discount. They get money on the balance sheet. It's all financial engineering.
Yeah.
In the end, somebody's still going to take care of the units, which this company doesn't actually do. Right?
But it proves there's a financial model to make it work.
There's a financial model, but in the end, contractors have to go service the unit. They're sending the bill to this guy instead of this guy. Did it fundamentally change? Is it anything other than financial engineering?
Right.
So
Another thing that might drive this is the fact that a lot of these buildings have these darn DDC systems that lasted forever and are way beyond their end of life, but are still functioning quite okay, they believe, but they actually need to be completely replaced.
Right.
And the owners, I think, they can't understand these $1 million retrofits that are necessary. And maybe rightly so. So if somebody takes it into a subscription model, I think they're going to look at that completely different, and they'll start jumping pieces of it out of that old obsolete equipment and trying to. What's happened in the 20 years that we've been putting this stuff in is it was envisioned that this stuff was there to save energy, and now it's got so many other purposes that its data is necessary to prove that we're doing a good job and that the building is safe. So yeah, I think that model could work.
Ken, do you think, you brought up a couple times the new trends towards alternative ways to network. So whether it's Wi-Fi or some kind of low power wireless, 5G, whatever. I mean, if, when you got all these LAN trunks and MSDP trunks wired throughout and you're trying to do an upgrade, it's really hard because it's sort of an all or nothing thing. But if you could maintain the local sensor wiring, if you will, and device endpoint wiring, but replace the controller and it's all wireless connected, you can now upgrade that building system by VAV, fan coil by fan coil, and do it in a logical, controllable way. Do you agree with that thinking?
I think the wireless overlay, somebody just posted a chat or a question or something with all that on there saying that we should look at those technologies. And I'm an old guy. I have a hard time talking and watching you guys and reading the notes at the same time. So that's why I was wanting you to capture them, Manto, but apparently we can't do that because people don't want to be tied to what they've suggested. But who suggested that?
So I'll jump in there. Steve Fay, I think that's really smart. Transcending cable and copper. There's so many technologies to do that. Campus-wide, neighborhood-wide, city-wide, regionally, and even globally. So CBRS is something you guys should keep an eye on. Somebody mentioned LoRaWAN. So there's some cool stuff out there.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that even those different media, different transport media, right? Ultimately, the data is still the data. The data has to be somewhere, and it's most likely going to be in the cloud somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking about different types of connectivity in media.
Yep.
I think only in our old minds. I think only in our old minds it's going to have to come back and go through the internet. But I don't think in the young minds, I think they see it. They just see that this information, we have it, we can collect it. We don't need, like, why would we bother doing that? It's just an extra overhead, an extra step. That's a new thinking. So it's pretty interesting what some of them are doing. The other thing is, I think some of this networking has become so complex and so expensive to maintain that that'll become the lowest cost solution. Will be running fiber in, putting in some G6, which hadn't been invented yet, routers, and supporting all of the CB, the old CB. I was getting a kick out of that. It went back to the CB communications and basically all these other different wireless networks, which can be overlaid in days in these buildings. So
wow.
I mean, interesting scenario.
Sinclair, you're hired, and that is here today. And that's the things that we're talking about now are going to enable this rapid and low cost adoption for what's next.
Yep, I agree. Yeah. I mean, you already see in the homes. I mean, look how you can implement, simply say, if you can implement your security, you don't have to run any wire. It's all wireless. And so why aren't we, I don't think we're doing enough thinking in that sense in commercial buildings.
I went to the Cortec in San Jose, the Realcomm Cortec, and they did a great job on that. And that was my prime purpose was going. I usually go to these things because I'm talking or something, but the last 3 or 4 I've gone to is just to try and learn and try and understand what the heck's going on. And I'm not doing very well, but I've got an inkling of somehow those pieces are fitting. But the whole idea that in today's world, we can become the telco, that's the simple state. Is if anybody on this page wants to become the telco, you can basically, if you got a nice glass connection to somewhere, you can then put in your own server and then go out from there.
Wow, love it.
Yeah, the question is if you're your own telco, can you be responsible for your own security? And you know, that depends on. That's where a lot of the future work is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about sort of a new model of a new type of company, potentially a new type of entity that can sort of do this, that can come in and basically buy the assets and offer services. And we talked a little bit about the sort of the communication wireless side, but putting that aside for a second, how does data play into that new model? This new type of company, obviously data will be a key part of its business because
the data people is virtually no change.
Yeah, there's a company out of Austin. They had modems that basically creates a mesh network of LoRaWAN devices. So they're thinking about like getting dog collars and bicycles within a LoRaWAN environment. So they sell this modem and then give money back to individual modem owners.
I'm sort of trying to focus on the business model, the structure of this. What does it look like, right? But because there's this new kind of entity that we perceive could occur that will just provide services on a monthly basis to tenants, right? They need data. So does the tenant need data as well? So is it that in addition to providing healthy environment for the occupants to use the space, are they also providing the data to the tenants, to the short-term tenants for them to use?
Well, I guess there's a situation of where this may be broken down ultimately, and you get people who are out there who are able to serve up the data to somewhere to, so it's in some sort of data lake, and then you'll actually find there's other people who are selling services to go into that to provide the information and services to the customers. So there's kind of three bits there where you get people who are actually getting the data out, someone who's actually looking after the data lake, and then the people who are pulling on that stuff to provide the services.
The consumers.
Kind of how I'm thinking.
The consumers of the data.
Yeah.
I think it's
Is
just
it
the service
truly
providers need the data, right? They're the ones responsible. I'm going to go back to something we talked about, last week. I'm moving into a building, right? I'm a lawyer. I'm this. I'm accounting. I'm not a facilities person. Red, green, yellow. I want the green light on, Jim, all the time. The green light better be on. That's your responsibility. I paid you for that. The green light stays on. I don't want to know anything else, right? Now, if it won't stay on, I want to audit the data. I want to find out. I don't know whether there's that much of an end use interest in data. We sell analytics to some end users, but that's because they're the operators. They're the ones who respond, not because they're the end user, right? I don't know. I don't worry about things I don't have to worry about. Right?
Someone's got to look after that building when the chiller or equipment fails. Right. You've got to get the data into the hands of someone who knows what to do with it. Right. Information. You've got to get it into the right hands. Mm-hmm. And that's what the skill set will be. As you say, they're lawyers, they're solicitors, they're everything else. It's the people who are looking after the facilities that really should be interested in this information.
That or these system integrators who are looking to have an additional revenue and business models where they send data where it's necessary, all securely and all on behalf of the building owner. And all of a sudden the system integrator is adding value they haven't even thought about, or whoever, the service provider.
You're right, Bill, because you're saying, okay, the SI needs to actually think about additional services, or he needs to be repurposing himself to actually do some, of a different sort of functions than he does today.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the other component the IT industry does is the concept of the SLA, right? Service level agreement. Mm-hmm. So what's your uptime? 99.995, right? Whatever that number is. You apply that to the service as a service for OT as a service. And the green light, John, to your point, what's your SLA? Are you up 99% of the time? Is it green? Mm-hmm. How long is it green? And if it falls below that, you owe the client money back. Mm-hmm. So you can apply that same principle to what we're doing. And people will understand that because they've been buying it on the IT side now for decades. So you could potentially sell this on the OT side just as well.
Yeah.
So
OT managed services.
So we're coming up to 4 o'clock. So I think we could make some closing comments. I think we've kind of come up with a sort of a new concept, whether it's reality or not, nobody really knows. So closing comments.
No, I didn't hype up very much, but I thought maybe I should a little bit. But Redactive, Carbon House, all these companies that are basically, John said the key word, financial engineering. They grew out of the PACE model for counting energy savings, and they're already set up as a service. And I think they're the performance contracting that they're doing, but the companies that I've seen in that area are very, 80% MBAs that want to, tell the risk managers how how you can count on your energy bill going down, just like as if, you know, it's kind of also keyed off of putting on the solar panels and doing the financing up front so that something could get done right away. They're sort of already in this service area. And I think that they are, as you say, the big problem is the way the real estate industry is running. And as Alper said, maybe we're at a pivot point because you can't count on that your building is a bond that we brought up before. The building's not going to be a bond anymore. So what is the building? But I think that there's some energy definitely in behind those companies, and I could see them walking into also because it is this risk management, worried about OSHA, the CFO's office. They seem to have had a better ability to tap on the door of the financial office.
So you're suggesting, Teresa, that it's new entrants that are going to provide the agility, perhaps not the people that are already in the industry?
Well, they've already got, it's not, they're still at our door. I know I know them all because they all wanted to come to Niagara Summit. They all are very interested in tritium. They don't want to do that. They don't want to get their hands dirty. They want to look at spreadsheets, and just like you would as if you put a solar panel in and wanted to know how long till it pays off. That was based on that model of if you do this many energy conservation measures, how long will they, we'll let you do them up front. You'll pay them off because it'll be based on the savings. It's all financial engineering. But I think those financial engineers still come to us, but for whatever reason, there really has to be that that cloud level of, a cloud's a bad word to use, but fluff is not a good word either, but you need those middle people to convince the others to do something. And then when they do it, then they find out it's not easy. They would probably like to, use some of this networking they're talking about, Ken, but then it never works. And then eventually they knock on Tritium's door and say, we made all these promises. How do we make it work?
But that may be, Teresa, where I was actually saying earlier, you get the guys who are in the industry now who are not so agile serving up the data, which they're able to do, to go somewhere, but the new entrants then actually offer all the services and the ability to drive the change and leave the other guys behind, perhaps.
Other closing comments?
For repurposing, I think we need to repurpose for sustainability with agility. Yeah. And that word has been, sustainability has been used within UN, but like for moving to big cities, I think that was a complete wrong approach. The way I've been running my business, I've been very sustainability oriented, and I follow one person, the founder of the Turkish Republic. In 1936, he moved a house not to cut a tree off a branch. And in 1936, the population of the world was 2 billion. Ideal Village was another project. And in 1930s, they were doing synthetic from an urban farm. And because I'm very oriented with the things that they taught us, I think for sustainability, we need a change in our industry for open hardware as well, and a common platform to move the industry forward with a hardware agnostic way of doing things. And I think we can achieve it to create more sustainability, and we would be agile as well at the same time.
Yeah, we've kind of forgotten the sustainable climate change thing in the middle of all this pandemic. We should not do that. So thanks for reminding us that.
I think also this might be driven back from what I'm calling the close community. I think we've been kind of jerked out of the mega city and sent home, and we've kind of discovered our kids and discovered our local community, and they kept us fed for the last couple of months, and we kind of appreciate what they've done, and we're great now. They're opening the restaurants, and so the whole sustainable thing hit us on the nose. And just another by the by is looking at the stats and stuff, the articles on Wake Up to Wireless have been more read than the COVID stuff, which is interesting. I didn't see that coming either. So that's my closing remarks.
Any other thoughts? Otherwise, we'll bring this to a close. Okay, well, thank you all for being part of Monday Live. And the slide deck that I showed at the beginning is actually on mondaylive.org now. So if you want to see that, want to click on any of the links, they're there. And video of this will be on YouTube sometime around midnight Eastern time today.
Okay.
With that,
Thank
have a
you.
great week.
Thanks, Anto.
Everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Hannah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.